Unit 1.2 Clear Objectives. A great teacher, trainer or tutor establishes SMART objectives for each session and works hard to facilitate the learning of those specific objectives successfully during each session. Having SMART objectives helps define which content is relevant and important in meeting the learning outcomes, which content needs to be assessed and how it should be assessed so that learning outcomes are attained in a way that is measurable. These learning outcomes also need to be achieved in a realistic time frame. Example of a learning goal: the student will compare how the invention of the printing press changed European society. Example of a learning objective: the student will explain how the invention of the printing press changed European society by distinguishing changes in education, increased literacy rates, increased industrialization, and the overall improvement of the lives of the middle class. Example of learning outcome: the student will be able to analyze the effects of the printing press by contrasting the differences in society before and after the invention of the printing press regarding literacy, education, industrialization and the overall improvement in the lives of the middle class. It would be a good idea to refer to Bloom's revised taxonomy when writing learning goals, learning objectives and learning outcomes. You can then match the different action verbs for each level of assessment. This is explained in Unit 5.1.2 Learning Goals, Objectives, and Outcomes in Unit 5. 2. Using learning objectives for assessment. Dividing textbooks, workbooks and/or other training materials down into sessions that include all the teaching and/or training objectives requires planning. Again, the material should be taught or explained logically so that the content is easy to understand. If you are limited by the number of sessions you are given to teach or train, this process is very important. Once you have divided the material into different sessions, you can identify the teaching or training objectives for that particular material for each session. Be careful in how you separate the material, as you should try to keep the subject material of themes, ideas, concepts, and theories connected and compartmentalized in a particular session for a logical explanation that facilitates easier understanding. You also don't want to add more unnecessary time wasting by having to reteach or retrain half-baked material you couldn't properly explain or demonstrate in a previous session. My suggestion is thinking of how you as a student or trainee would like to learn this new information. A clear logical way to teach and learn. So all things being equal, you might have parts in your material that have more teaching or training objectives than others. Decide what content will be taught in each particular session. Take holidays, events, sports etc. into account, as there will be times that you will not be able to teach. Having divided your material and the teaching or training objectives into sessions, you have now created a pacing schedule. Later you could create lesson plans for those sessions. By knowing the amount of material you need to cover, whether by content, volume or the number of pages in the textbook or training guide, you can decide how you want to approach each session. Having prepared your content into well-planned sessions, you can identify and clearly outline your teaching or training objectives to your target audience and have a defined structure around which you can build a lesson or training session, commonly known as a lesson plan. Remember, teaching objectives lead to learning outcomes, and students are assessed on how well they are able to learn and implement what they have been taught. There cannot be a disconnect between what you taught, teaching objectives, and what you assessed, learning outcomes. Knowing what the desired learning outcomes are can also help you define what teaching objectives and learning objectives need to be included. You could also create a scheme of work which is an outline of what vocabulary, concepts, theories that will be covered in each lesson. References, resources, and activities to be used in lessons. Using the basic structure of a lesson plan, it would give you the outline you can use to introduce your objectives, discuss, and explain them, and then also follow up with an exercise or activity as well as a summary. Lesson plans will be covered later in Unit 5.1, the main components of a lesson plan. Thanks for watching this video. Lesson plan.